Hello, good people. Welcome to Off the Deep End, a Deep Listens podcast where we explore various role-playing video games in depth. My name is Jeff Rude, the host and ringleader of this operation. Joining me on the apparently corporately built starship that's been commandeered by military people to find, parts of the Kabbalah, we have Chris, Zombie Pie, Redacted.
Hey Jeff, it's almost time for the party of the summer. What's your favorite Summerslam match? My favorite Summerslam match is Diesel versus King Mabel, because when I think of the two best workers to ever have graced the wrestling industry, I think of Diesel, a man who really put over the belt, and Mabel, a physically gifted specimen who really just put his all into making sure that everyone he worked with was safe. A close second place would have to be, the classic that I really think about every day, Batista versus the Great Khali. Two wrestlers well known for having more than 3 moves.
Is this a fighting game I've never heard of? Is this like Melty Blood or?
Yeah, it's a wrestle
Jeff,
war.
I could watch, Shawn Michaels versus Hulk Hogan, because Shawn Michaels flopping around like an octopus whenever he takes a big boot to the face is my spirit animal.
The voice you heard is the voice in your head screaming about wrestling, and the other voice that you heard asking about wrestling belongs to Braden, Arbitrary Water Redacted. Hello, Braden.
Hi, hello. I'm here. I'm responsible for this. I finished Shadow Hearts this week, which honestly I think we probably could have played instead of this, but I was already busy playing it. And this is more fun.
Define fun. I just define the word fun.
It causes you pain.
We're not
awesome.
gonna. You can be into whatever you're into.
You know what could cause me less pain is if you allowed me to talk about fake Undertaker versus Undertaker at SummerSlam.
The
great return of...
That had Leslie Nielsen in the build.
Yeah, Leslie Nielsen investigating where did the Undertaker go, and then Bruce Pritchard came along and says, "I found the Undertaker," and then at SummerSlam, Paul Bearer came back and's like, "Naha! I found the real Undertaker in my urn." That's magical.
On this episode, we won't be talking about the SummerSlams of yore, but you should check out Old School Wrestling, the podcast, if you want to learn more about those. But on this show, on this episode, we will begin our likely extensive discussions of Xenosaga Episode 1, Der Wille zur Macht. Xenosaga Episode 1 was originally developed by Monolith Soft and published by Namco for the PlayStation 2 on February 28th, 2002, subsequently released in PAL and NTSC US territories, and then subsequently sort of reimagined for the Nintendo DS in 2006, along with the second entry of the series. If you, the listener, would like to be a part of ongoing conversations about Xenosaga or wrestling or food or art or crime or a lot of card games, people like fucking card games.
I've had to mute that channel multiple times just because I can't.
I don't want to play Magic the Gathering. I don't. But if these things are interesting
it's more or
to
less like, look at this brave Exodus character who got a card. Durr. It's like my brain just turned off. I'm sorry. Well, I can't.
If you'd like to come to probably the second most active Final Fantasy TCG community on the internet, you can kick in to the Deep Listens Patreon. It's at patreon.com/deeplistens. $1 or anything above that will get you access to our super cool Discord, where you can join the Off the Deep End channel and, engage in conversations about the Zohar and Momo. And you can also, if you're interested, send us emails directly. You can send them to deeplistenspod@gmail.com if you want. Or you can be real cool and send them direct to us because we got a vanity TLD. That's right. From now on, you sons of bitches, if you want to send us an email, you can send it to inquiries@deep.lol. Deep.lol also redirects straight to our Libsyn website, so you can go look at that. If you want to send questions to the main group, you can also send those to questions@deep.lol. So that's the novelty top level domain I squatted. It's I'm doing God's work. I think it's short enough that it's going to be worth something eventually.
Please send
which
us
god? Which god?
your
There are
hate
many
mail.
gods in this world. Which one?
We're going to talk about some gods.
Please send us your fan mail.
Yeah, send us drawings of like robots and stuff.
Do you like cool anime robots?
I will shout out any drawing I receive of any robot.
Do you enjoy the form but not the substance of Christianity and Judaism through the lens of anime?
Do you like looking at anime characters cradling people as they give them their dying last words and then cry as the rain falls on their face and their tears disappear into the rain?
If you want to send us your predictions for Season 2 of The Devil is a Part-Timer...
No, this
is the email address to do so.
I'm super excited. I'm legitimately
this
excited.
This can't be an anime podcast, but unfortunately we're going to have to talk about anime here. So Monolith Soft, these Xeno games. So this is the second entry into what is like, if you go to Wikipedia, is in like a big like Xeno continuity that kicked off with Xenogears. So what is our overall familiarity with these games?
I actually played Xenogears.
I love how every time we have to be like
no, not Xenogears. Xenoblade.
Xenoblade is the Nintendo one with the Smash Bros.
Xenogears is assless chaps?
Yes, Xenogears is assless chaps, and
okay, then I definitely played Xenogears before Xenosaga, but that's completely irrelevant. I played, like many people who owned a Wii U and was desperately looking, or a Nintendo Wii, actually, desperately looking for, like, a meaty, chunky, Wii RPG experience because, that Paper Mario game is trash.
No, it's not. No,
and then also
Mario's fine.
That game is trash. It's booty ass.
It's fine.
They took out all the RPG shit that made the entire series good.
No, the writing's still good.
The writing is very good. The game is
all that 2D to 3D shit was bad. The 3D shit looks like garbage.
I don't like the NPCs in that game.
I mean, I don't like
the whole like summoning the little like fucking chocobo thing that helps you do levels, and like half of them are just completely irrelevant outside of one specific. Oh god, we don't need to talk about that trash ass game.
Look forward to our Paper Mario.
I will fuck up some Thousand Year Door if and when we get there.
Does not promise or endorse any sort of Paper Mario themed episode. I'd do it anyway.
But no, yeah, I had played Xenoblade Chronicles on the Wii because I was looking for like some sort of meaty RPG experience, and also followed Operation Rainfall. Some of whom, the people who organized that, were former members of the Giant Bomb forums.
That's right.
I wound up buying all three of those games.
Shadows of
now. God, I think most of those people ended up no longer being parts of the community because they were not great people.
It's a little zealous.
Yeah. But I played that game, and it's like, this is like an even worse version of Final Fantasy XII, and also the story here is just complete nonsense. And then by playing this game, it kind of made me realize, and we'll jump into, trading off, that I think Monolith Soft just makes the same game over and over again.
Or they have been working on the same game, just reiterating it. Yeah.
Well, Braden, what is your
experience
with this game that you have wrought upon us?
I want to take at least half the credit for it.
I mean, yes, this is technically my doing because I bought the entire trilogy on eBay. The first game is quite affordable, the second game is reasonable, and the third game is not.
It's one of those I mean, it hasn't entered like Panzer Dragoon Saga territory, but for
Yeah.
PS2 game, it's pretty steep.
Yeah, my Xeno experience is for a while I mained Shulk in Smash 4.
I enjoyed Shulk.
I think he's fun as far as like anime sword boy. I have never played. I watched my roommate play through the entirety of Xenoblade Chronicles 2, which is the Switch one.
How long, like,
What with the
is that
ladies.
as long as, like, these games purport to be? Because
I believe it's an 80-hour experience.
That
if
game
I
is like
recall.
80 hours.
Yeah.
And he did everything because he. Shoutouts to Mike. Love you. He did everything. He got all the gacha blades. So
Wow.
I saw a lot of that stuff. And
Yes.
I
How long to beat
enjoyed
is 65
watching it.
hours.
Yeah, I enjoyed watching him play that game. I do not think I would have enjoyed playing that game myself. I think the specific MMO light combat and
Yeah.
world design of Xenoblade Chronicles and 2 aren't great. I also played like 20 hours of Xenoblade Chronicles X, which is the one with the robots, and
Isn't that also
the same
considered the bad
character
one?
designer as this game. So everyone looks like a creepy haunted doll.
my squad,
What about you, Jeff?
I played probably the first 12 hours of Xenoblade Chronicles at some. I get like chronologically. In high school, I bought and played maybe the first like 3 hours of this very game, and was like, no, this is not for me right now, and just promptly got rid of it. But I still remembered the opening of this game as being this completely just insane. We'll talk about it. It's a memorable opening to a piece of media. So that was my first encounter with this stuff. My best friend in high school, who's no longer with us, he summarized all of JRPGs based on his experience as Xenogears as like he would sort of stand in front of you and bob back and forth, and then he'd walk up to you and swing his arm and say like 12, and then he'd like slowly back away from you. So every time I think of Xenogears, I picture James doing that. So that's my experience with Xenogears. I also own the thing. It's sitting on a shelf. I put it maybe 10 hours in Xenoblade Chronicles because I wasn't like a hardcore Project Rainfall person, but I was a let's buy things on the Wii because I like the Wii because I still like the Wii. Sicko. And then Chronicles X is where I like went ham. Like I got maybe like 2/3 of the way through that game, which is, 60 hours or something. Boy, I played a lot of that game and slogged through broad portions of it for reasons I don't really understand, I guess. It was like I had this cool Riot Girl crew of like Riot girls that like shot things to death and then cut them up with swords. And the music, notwithstanding the music in the city, which is like famously bad, was like kind of good. It strung me along in a way that I was like kind of surprised by. Also, it was on the Wii U, There wasn't like a ton of like really good meaty stuff to sink your teeth into on that platform. God rest it.
I can relate to this.
So most of my experience is with the one that like probably the fewest people played and or enjoyed and maybe has the most problems. And that's including the series where you get girls out of a gacha machine that are just swords. So, these people are fucking weird. But yeah, like it's a series made by a group of people that have had some sort of like weird stories they've kept going back to over and over again. And I think that dovetails nicely with like, there's a couple things that you need to have as like broad cultural context to really place Monolith Soft and this stroke of like RPGs sort of in place. And I think ZP, you're definitely equipped to talk about this more than I am, and Braden, you probably are as well, but like the main chunk of that, way more than the thing I'm about to go off on, is a show called Neon Genesis Evangelion by Gainax.
Yep.
Pretty much all anime,
Especially mecha anime.
anything to do with robots and sad boys. That
Or
from the late
you use
90s
any
on.
anime or
Yeah.
JRPG that uses Christian imagery.
Yeah.
Although you could make an argument that it kind of really started with Akira, but
Yeah.
man, it got weaponized to a far greater degree with the release of Evangelion.
Yeah, we're not gonna do a whole anime podcast on Evangelion because
All you really need to know about Evangelion is that it has, at its core, the themes and undertones of surfacing anxiety and depression, and then also use of Christian imagery and names and pining towards this idea or concept of musings about philosophical debates that have not been solved or resolved as you kind of move forward with this plot, right? Ennui is the perfect way to say it.
My encounters with Neon Genesis Evangelion are in undergrad. I saw, I guess, what was like the last 20 or 30 minutes of one of the films, which is the one that's like interspersed with a bunch of live action footage of like an empty theater and shit, right? Am I making this up in my head?
Yes, no, that's how End of Evangelion ends.
Yeah, and that's the Come Caesar Toad, the one that people have redone with the Banjo-Kazooie sound font, which is hilarious.
Yeah, Professor Todd.
Rockobot did a cover of it recently.
Like, every time you can listen to that done with a different sound font, you should, because it's, like, just incredible.
It's very funny.
But that, and then at a certain point a couple years ago, the university that I work at, that I won't name, has the DVD version of Evangelion collectively, like, in its holding. So I watched maybe the first half of the anime, which is, when you watch just the first half of it, it's sort of brushes on some of these themes we've talked about, but for the most part, it is like a Monster of the Week show that is just kind of horny. Like, there's a teen boy and robots and horny, and that's about the extent of it.
Yeah, that's what the first half of that series is.
And then you get past that first half, and then you realize it is also important to know that the reason why the figurehead of why Evangelion has become this cultural landmark is Hideaki Anno, the director and creator of Neon Genesis Evangelion. It is important to note that the reason why there was that hard turn into this like existential dread and like deep philosophical musings is because Hideaki Anno had a mental breakdown while he was making Evangelion, and he used the show to surface the fact that he was being overworked and experienced a mental breakdown.
He had a mental breakdown during Nadia, and then
they're like, yo, we need you to make more anime because it's making us money.
Wait, these people made Nadia?
Yes.
Huh,
dude,
okay.
Nadia Secret of Blue Water is real good.
There's a Genesis RPG that Namco made based on that show.
Nadia is like 2 really good episodes at the beginning and then 3 very good episodes at the end, and everything in between is meh.
It's a fun fantasy adventure series that also has a terrible
Why that
filler
show
arc
was
in the
39 episodes.
Yeah, it is 13 episodes too long.
Hideaki Anno had a mental breakdown, and there's like some sort of like producer's backstory to Gainax, or the people who were in charge of Gainax thought that by giving Evangelion to Anno while he was very much emotionally and mentally compromised would cause the company to go bankrupt because they had shorted their insurance, and so they were going to make a killing if it was a complete disaster. But then the show made its money back, and so those producers ended up going to jail. Huge thing. But this leads to the 2 kind of big things that grace Evangelion, which is psychologically complex characters that are always underpinned by some of the most codified anime tropes, and then completely meaningless religious symbolism. Like, you watch Evangelion and every explosion takes the shape of a cross. Everything just transforms into a cross, and
it looks cool.
I really need to sit down and watch the rest of that show.
Evangelion 3.0 plus 1.0 comes out on Monday.
Like, I want to watch those, what I understand to be somewhat radical remakes and re-envisionings of the series, but I feel like I need to see the rest of the shit first, because context.
The one thing that I will say that is just the best about Evangelion is that Hideaki Anno has repeatedly come back to Evangelion, and the level of not giving a fuck that he has whenever he goes back to the Evangelion franchise, especially with this movie trilogy, it's just the goddamn best.
He has a clear and obvious antagonism for his fans, in a way that I don't think Monolith Soft does.
Yeah, and that makes Monolith Soft's like more, we're just gonna give you the story and our version of these like philosophical debates a lot less, more compelling.
They're a little more earnest.
And I feel like definitely this game so far, it does a lot in terms of capturing the turmoil of adolescence and teenagehood and young adulthood, like
it's exceptional at that. Like it really, like there's something at the core of that show that makes it like you're capable of like walking around all of the eye rolly shit, because there's like a kernel of like, boy, isn't it weird all of the pressure we put on like young adults in this country to like perform and become a part of this like ridiculous economy that like can't ever get off this rail or else we will all die. Like just like the anxiety that you put upon people being maybe something that's worth examining. Like I think that's like an Austin Walker observation, but
yeah,
but that tracks, and that like tracks across like nationalities and race in a lot of ways. Like it's a sort of universal feeling, and people just like looking at titty, and that show has that.
Yeah, that's the one thing that's the weirdest thing, and there's something to be said about Xenosaga in general, is like the fact that all of these things present these characters as they look and act this way for a reason, and it's like, fine, but doesn't this property completely miss the point because you're not preventing your own merchandising future? Yeah. Like all these Evangelion stores and t-shirts and glasses, it's like you're just literally objectifying the show's female characters.
There's that video about how you can live off of Evangelion branded merchandise.
Yeah, and then I think that that's something that's definitely missing in Xenosaga, is that these characters, they're, at least with what we've played so far, they are their tropes.
But they have, the game respects its characters so far.
Does it?
I mean, Cosmos is like a robo waifu in high heels.
We've got so much runway for them to blow these things up still. But so there's the Ava thing. The other part of this, and this is where a bunch of the audience is probably either going to run away or really decide that I'm like a nice person. But unfortunately, I'm a history major, and I studied this stuff like very specifically, so I have to talk about this, like history and religion and East Asia in the early 20th century. So here we go. Right. So all of this very heady mishmash of what could lazily be labeled as Judeo-Christian imagery. I want to sort of unpack that phrase first a little bit. So the phrase Judeo-Christian is about 200 years old. It was first used by Christians to literally describe people of the Jewish faith who ultimately converted to Christianity, and really came into prominence during the mid-20th century in America as a way for conservative people in the United States to sort of create a cultural bulwark against communism by sort of trying to culturally align Christians and Jewish groups in the United States with each other against, like, the, let's say, anti-theistic tendencies within communism. Also to satisfy the needs of a sort of evangelical base who, after years of being told that Jewish people were, like, bad and accusing them of blood libel and stuff, on sort of selling them, like, hey, maybe Israel's a good thing because it fulfills some prophecies. I'm going to read a kind of lengthy quote here, verbatim. This is from a law professor named Stephen Feldman, who wrote in 1998. I forget the name of the book, if you'll excuse me for just a second. The book is called Please Don't Wish Me a Merry Christmas, A Critical History of the Separation of Church and State. And again, this is Jeff on a hobby horse, and I'm very sorry. Once one recognizes that Christianity has historically engendered anti-Semitism, then this so-called tradition, the tradition being Judeo-Christianity, appears as a dangerous Christian dogma, at least from a Jewish perspective. For Christians, the concept of the Judeo-Christian tradition comfortably suggests that Judaism progressed into Christianity, that Judaism is somehow completed in Christianity. The concept of the Judeo-Christian tradition flows from the Christian theology of supersessionism, whereby the Christian covenant or testament with God supersedes the Jewish one. Christianity, according to this belief, reforms and replaces Judaism. The belief, therefore, implies first that Judaism needs reformation and replacement, and second that modern Judaism remains merely as a relic. Most importantly, the belief of the Judeo-Christian tradition insidiously obscures the real and significant difference between Judaism and Christianity. So that's, like, it's kind of a nonsense phrase that means nothing except as a political convenience of certain groups to, like, align people generally against Islam now and communism 50 years ago. So it's a phrase that will probably slip out of my mouth a couple times in describing this game, but it's fraught. The other rail that's worth talking about here is, so there's Christian imagery that's used, and that's like, you're gonna feel a way about that depending on how you were raised, and that's fine. And then there's specifically Jewish imagery that gets used, let's say appropriated in Japan at times. This is where Jeff had to dig out a bunch of papers he wrote. So you could nicely be like, oh, what the hell? It's like, it's a thing that like 5 Japanese people have heard of in passing. Like, who cares? Japan has a very long and interesting history of contact with Judaism, and I'm going to tell you all about it. Right, okay. So the first Jews arrived in Japan basically at the end of the Reconquista era. They arrived in Nagasaki from Spain, fleeing Catholic persecution. They were ultimately displaced by, like, Sengoku period warfare, specifically by the Shimazu clan. But it's worth noting that, like, so there's, like, European Jewry, but Jewish people had spread across Asia for, like, thousands of years prior. Like, after the destruction of the Second Temple, like, the, basically heartland of, like, the Jewish community in the world was basically Baghdad. But you've got Jews living in China, you've got lots of Jews living in Persia. Handfuls of Jews started dripping into Japan in the early 19th century, and they faced basically what amounted to, like, general xenophobia, which Japan was and remains, like, pretty good at. I've got 1 or 2 stories about this. The door gets kind of more open when Commodore Perry shows up in Japan and forcibly opens their economy to, like, foreign trade. Most Jews from this time were coming from either, like I said, the Iraqi community, or, like, contemporary Iraq, or from Russia, fleeing pogroms. So the 2 big inflection points for all of this deal with Russia. The first one was the Russo-Japanese War, which, for those of you who don't know, 1904 to 1905, it's like the coming out party for Japan as, like, a global power is, like, how happy white imperialists would probably write it off. So, like, the weird secret hero of the whole thing is this American banker and philanthropist whose name is Jacob Schiff. Jacob Schiff basically donated enough money to Imperial Japan for them to basically underwrite half of their navy, which ultimately is what, like, won that war for them. He did this specifically because he really, really, really hated the Tsar of Russia. Specifically because of all the pogroms. Like, and, like, had no assurance, like, no one had any confidence at all that Japan would win this war. But he
was a Jewish-American banker, German-born, but emigrated to Russia, had been subjected by the pogroms, and when he saw an opportunity, he was like, I'm gonna give you a shit ton of money, just remember to poke the fucking Russians in the eye.
Yeah. He is the first foreigner to ever receive the Order of the Rising Sun award, and he's still relatively popular in Japan to this day.
He also played a pretty big role in the rise of Zionism in the United States in particular. Zionism really in the United States really leaped when, well, I don't know how else to say this. When the United States did not accept Jewish immigrants during the Holocaust is when really Zionism exploded, and the calls for getting the Jewish state reached almost a breaking point, even to where, like, there were constant petitions in the United Nations for the Jewish state to be recognized and created. The only thing that I think, Jeff, you missed was, like, the whole movement of Sono Joey, or the throw the foreigner out movement that kind of took Japanese and Chinese philosophy and the co-prosperity sphere that imperialist Japan was developing,
we're getting there.
Oh, we were getting there? Okay,
Yeah.
Cool, because that was my studies in history.
So the other, like, Russia spoke of this as the actual revolution in 1917. So here's the fun thing about World War I. As far as America was concerned, it kind of ended with the armistice in, like, November 11th at 11/11 in 1918. That's, like, not strictly true. When the Russian Revolution happened and the Soviets organized a separate peace, eventually wind up aligned with Turkey. The UK winds up aligned with Germany. Japan, who was already nominally an ally during the war, becomes even more closely ensconced with the Entente powers. And basically World War I sort of continues until about 1922 in parts of Central Asia. That gets rolled into, like, the White Russian sort of counter-revolutionary movement, which basically simmers through the mid-20s. Anyway, Japan was deeply involved in that effort to sort of overthrow, like, the nascent Soviet government. It was during that fun adventurism that a handful of like Japanese military and industrialist personalities become very close friends with White Russian leadership. And that's basically where they come into contact with a little screed called the Protocols of the Elders of Zion.
Oh no.
Which, for anyone who's not familiar with that text, is basically the origin of... Not quite the origin, but like it's the crystallized in-text form of the Jews control everything libel, conspiracy, myth, problematic, horrible thing. And a handful of these gentlemen who become involved in various parts of the Japanese imperial governmental and industrial apparatus.
This is also the book that Henry Ford funded about the printing of 500,000 copies of.
Yeah, worth noting, Henry Ford, very, very into this book. But they get really into this book. So, anxiety about Soviet expansion and kind of a desire to be seen as, like, more equal to other world powers at the time, which is really glossing over some stuff, kind of pushes Japan on this path beginning in, like, the very late 20s, early 1930s, and this is where Manchuria gets annexed, as a sort of Lebensraum thing, but also as a buffer state for the Soviet Union. So, when they annex Manchuria, they accidentally go from having about 1,000, sort of small, isolated communities of Middle Eastern Jews living on, like, the home islands to suddenly having about 30,000 Jews living in Japan. Because a lot of people had fled pogroms in Eastern Europe and gotten as far from the Tsar as they could, easily, which happened to be, like, the Soviet Far East and Manchuria. The Russian Far East, I guess. So, around this time, Japan starts getting in bed with Nazi Germany, which, on its face, was less about any sort of specific anxieties about minority groups. In fact, one of the Japan's, like, big ideas was this Greater East Asian co-prosperity sphere and ethnic harmony in Manchuria as a means of, like, keeping control of it. The alliance was about isolating the Soviet Union and, like, international communism. So in this period, the Nazi government basically starts slowly pumping in various, like, anti-Semitic screeds into Japanese, or they get circulated among, like, the leadership with, you know, hey, guess what? The American Jews that run the country secretly have authored all these immigration laws that keep Japanese people out of there. Or, you know, Jewish leadership in America and the United Kingdom, they're the ones who are actually exposed to Japanese expansion. They don't want you to be a world power. Chiang Kai-shek, the person in charge of nationalist Japan, he's close friends with Victor Sassoon, a prominent British Jewish authority. So China is also in the hand of the Jews. When Japan invades, like, southern China in 1937, their ambassador to France told the French government that, like, Jewish leadership in all of the allied nations were, like, one of their main concerns. Like, specifically the Jews in France and America and the United Kingdom are, like, holding us back. Which is a strange thing to say on its face. So, despite this, Shanghai becomes, like, basically the top destination in the world for people fleeing pogroms in Eastern Europe. That is a result of it being kind of a weird international city due to all the carve-outs that various Western powers had. So there were, like, virtually no visa requirements to get to Shanghai. All you had to do was get there. Which sounds like it would be a pain in the ass, but there's a handful of people that kind of made that easier. Chief among them was Sugihara Chiyune, who was the Japanese consul to Lithuania. He personally underwrote a lot of visas and passports for Jewish people in Lithuania and Poland at the time and helped about 6,000 people flee from the Holocaust. Sugihara Chiyune received the Righteous Among the Nations, like, award from Yad Vashem, which is, like, the International Holocaust Museum in Israel in 1984. You also get a handful of people like Colonel Senka Yasue. He individually helped foster, like, closer ties within, like, various Jewish groups in Manchuria during the late 30s. He personally saw to, like, anti-Semitic newspapers being shut down in parts of the Japanese Empire. He had his name inscribed in the Golden Book of the Jewish National Fund. And all this despite him being one of these generals I mentioned, or colonels, who was fighting with the White Russians and, like, literally thought the Jews were these, like, horrible lizard people that controlled all of the banks. Also among those ranks was Izunaga Korishige, who was a Japanese imperial captain. He literally was the author of, like, a policy called the Fugu Plan. The population of Japan needs to be controlled because they're very dangerous, but they're very powerful, and we could use them. But if we handle them incorrectly, it could be a real poison. This person pushed for expansions of, like, Jewish settlements in Japan, sought aid for Jewish organizations. For this man's efforts, this, like, basically an anti-Semite, he received, like, the cigarette case from the Union of Orthodox Rabbis in the United States. Why do I bring that up? Because he was tried for war crimes after the war against US soldiers. And he produced this cigarette case. He's like, look, the rabbis in the US like me. And it basically got him off the hook from, like, being hung. That cigarette case is now also at Yad Vashem in Israel. So, it's complicated. Japan only recognized Israel in 52. They've only had embassy contacts since 62. They've generally favored, like, the Arab League and OPEC during, like, any crisis that's happened. And to this day, like, anti-Semitic books are kind of this weird cottage industry in Japan. So, all this is to say, when you see a piece of Japanese media that invokes, like, Jewish imagery, it's not like they saw something neat in a book one time and were like, well, that's cool, let's throw it in. Like, there are certainly, like, culturally naive people who, like, don't really give a shit. Like, in the same way that, like, an American person would be like, yeah, yoga, it's cool, it's, like, from India. But you should probably not assume that everyone is being, like, entirely naive, I guess. So, right, we also played a video game. Oh, you know what? Before we walk too far from this, I forgot two really important weird parts of this history. Early on, before they attacked the United States, the Japanese parliament basically asked the Jewish settlement in Shanghai to write the Secretary of the Treasury in the U.S., who was Jewish, basically telling them to, like, please, like, let's not have a war. And then towards the end of the war, they were actively asking the Jewish community in Tianjin to radio broadcast to the American Navy to end the war. Like, convinced that it would just be like, hey, Jewish people in the Empire, write these other Jews and tell them we need to stop fighting, because you guys just control the government there, right? like, this will just work, right?
We also played a video game where there's a booby robot lady that's named Mary Magdalene.
Hey now, you didn't... Played is an overstatement.
So
we played 6 hours of this game, and I would estimate generously 3 hours of it was cutscenes.
Maybe more.
Maybe more. We might have gone like 4 hours of cutscenes, 2 hours of gameplay. It was basically just one puzzle dungeon that was complete garbage. And some tutorializing and
an
extended stealth section?
I don't feel like I get the mechanics fully yet.
No,
but they're straightforward. It's not the battling that I think is complicated. It's the leveling of the characters that I really have like some sort of pent up anxiety about, because it's like, fuck, this is of that era where if I level a character wrong, I bet it's gonna bite me in the ass 3 or 4 hours down the road. I've
refrained from engaging with too much of that stuff beyond what the tutorial stuff in like the in-game wiki basically tells you is a good idea. And I don't even know if that was a good idea, but boy, it'd be shitty if that game was just outright lying to you. But let's start from the beginning. So this game starts in like today times.
Right, the flashback.
Yeah.
XX.
God damn.
In like the Horn of Africa. And we've got a Japanese research scientist with a group of, let's call them anthropologists, archaeologists, running around for stuff. And they find, like, future alien tech shit in a dry lake bed. And a man's like, wow, there's a strange orifice on this weird, flat, shiny sort of device thing. I happen to have this MacGuffin with me. Let's see if this works. And slots it in. And there's a light show. And amazing visuals. And inexplicable, floaty, weird, semi-Christological imagery. And then you just get a hard cut to black, and then space, and then the game just says 4,000 years later. And I think that is the single most ridiculous, like, that is up there with Tales of Games presents Chef Boyardee's Charles Barkley shut up in Gaiden Chapter 1 of the Hoops Barkley Saga, just saying, like, the following is canon?
This game is audacious and indulgent in a way that only Japanese games from this era really are.
This was of an era where I feel like JRPGs really became entrenched with not just placating a very dedicated, ravenous fan base, but also just trying to do things that they are not aware that there's some sort of disconnect or there's some sort of, like, disconnect. Just an incongruous messaging. Like, you spent that time, and I'm glad, Jeff, you did spend that time talking about Judaism imagery. You're forgetting that the second part of this game is Jungian psychology. Psychoanalytic psychology is the second part of this game. Like, psychoanalysis and Freudian, psychoanalysis is the second part of this puzzle in terms of, like, the background plotting of this. Which I do appreciate that this game is seemingly aware that Jungian and Freudian psychoanalysis are two different things. I did appreciate that, because a lot of people forget that part.
Two different individuals.
Persona knows the difference.
So we cut to, it's 4,000 years in the future, and it is space times, and there's not a lot of context given for what we are seeing at this immediately, but at this point, are they picking up the item that is just called, well, the name of it isn't given yet, but is this the mysterious object has already been picked up or being picked up?
It's being picked up. It's a big old gold space monolith. What has Hebrew characters on it?
Yeah.
So it is important. I do want to mention this before you get into that. Monolith Soft has been kind of obsessed with this idea that, every single time we make an RPG, Earth got fucked and we need to find a new planet. They've been doing this for 20 goddamn games almost. And they just love this idea of, Earth got destroyed, we need to find a new planet for humanity, and oh no, the primary antagonist is going to do the same thing that fucked up Earth on our new planet that we need to call home. We need to respect Terra.
Yeah, they have this story of the Earth being destroyed, and they haven't even really introduced you to this, like, concept yet. Like, I don't even know if they really spell that out clearly in the time we play it, but you can kind of infer it, I suppose. But clearly we're, like, a weird, giant, deep space-faring species with, like, some sort of unified government that is referred to, and some weird, like, Wayland Yutani, like, Ultra Corps that are in bed with them, stroke semi-antagonistic to them. Because Shion's not with the military, right? So we have
she's
this
with Vector Industries.
Vector, that's the name of the Future Corp. So it's this military fleet expedition, and sort of embedded with them is this corporate interest Vector Corp, among whom is an officer named Shion Uzuki?
Yes.
Who is responsible for some sort of weird project.
So, can I try to break this down?
Please.
This is gonna be a lot, folks. Not a lot happens in the 6 hours we played, but also a lot happens.
The density is... It's weird. It's so goddamn weird.
This game has a glossary.
Yeah, like, a PlayStation 2 game that has a glossary, which is a really forward-facing thing. Like, Final Fantasy 13 had a glossary. Maybe that's a bad sign.
Mass Effect has a glossary.
Maybe it's a good sign.
So, yeah, Shion is working on the USS Vogland?
I couldn't tell if it was German or if it was Chinese, because I was like, it's either Vogland or it's like Woglinde. Like, I don't know.
It's Wollander.
Yeah. Wollander, okay.
Okay, and humanity is... This is where the Evangelion stuff just very blatant. Humanity is under attack by some sort of interdimensional alien species.
Do you understand where Wolinda is a reference of? It's the Rhine Maidens. It's a water nymph in Richard Wagner's Der Ring des Nibelungen.
The Ring Cycle.
Ring Cycle.
I love Wagner. Let's talk about Wagner's connection to fascism.
Speaking of anti-Semitism.
It's
just turtles all the way down, damn it.
So she's stationed at that Federation starship.
She is working on
finishing to complete Cosmos. So this is where we see our introduction to Cosmos, and where you, Jeff, were very interested in the presentation of like Christian, Judeo-Christian imagery. Whenever Cosmos is introduced, there's usually some sort of long, like, what is personhood? What is individuation? What is the true self? And then it gets into id, sub-id, super ego type of shit. And it's like, oh, yeah, I love you get into the idea of archetypes and psychological types. Like, then they get into the Jungian psychology stuff. And then that's when it's like, oh, my brain is firing off. My synapses are kicking in, the little red book. But not the communist book. I'm talking about the red book of Jung.
So everyone listening to this who hasn't just fallen asleep or ran away screaming, basically there are 3 tracks you can follow us on. There's the anime track, where the anime happens, the space anime. There's the Gnosticism track, where symbolism and symbology and thematics will be used from the Jewish and Christian religions, but only the mystical stuff. And then there's, the psychological, what makes a person human track.
And doesn't Vanderkam call Shion a bimbo?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good job, localization.
The localization.
And I was like, that's not what that word means, my man. What?
I think the localization's worth, like, briefly touching on, too, because it's, like, not bad necessarily, but it's from an era where you still have, like, the direction is, I think, the issue. Like, it gets the text across, which is, like, heady, complicated language and suffers from some proper noun syndrome, and but, like, it's doing okay, but it's, like, I have to deliver this line with a big gap in it in order to match the lip flap. Like they didn't bother redoing some of this stuff.
I am sympathetic to the voice actors in this game.
Yeah.
I don't think that the voice acting is bad. I think that they were given a shit sandwich, and you can't turn chicken shit into a chicken salad.
I think the voice acting for this game is of its era. It is some early 2000s anime voice acting, and there are definitely some, like, LA-based anime voice actors I recognize.
It's very, like, it's meaningful to compare this to 10, which came out, like, months beforehand in the United States.
Yeah.
And I think they're, like, the 10 delivery is maybe better, but the direction is about the same, because, again, it's a lip flap problem.
Yeah.
Like, everything just pauses a little too long at all these, like, awkward spots. But, like, overall, I think the actual, as far as the 6 hours I've seen went, it's okay. It's just, like you said, they're handed some really insane shit to work with.
The words they have to say it's impressive.
Yeah. Like, for instance, Cosmos.
I really want to hear the outtakes for this game.
Re-release this on PS5, damn it, with all the outtakes.
And I know, was Sony still on their shit where, like, you had to, if you were going to release a game in the United States, it had to have English voice acting? I know that they started that with the PS1, but is there any justification for them releasing this game without the Japanese language version with subtitles?
Straight up DVD space, I think, is the actual answer.
In terms of having, like, both tracks?
Yeah.
Like, when Sakura Wars, So Long My Love came out on the PS2, it was a 2-disc thing where one of them was in English and one of them was Japanese.
Yeah. The Wii version was only 1 disc, but I think that might have been dual layer or something. I don't remember. Or only had 1 language track. Who knows? But yeah, they're Cosmos.
So we're on the Woglin Day. She's finishing her research building Cosmos.
Yeah.
And so she's involved with Cosmos's encephalon testing in order to, like, get some data is what we learned about.
This is the first gameplay sequence. Yeah, it's a Cosmos and Shion doing VR training, basically.
Based off of what we played here, it's a JRPG, and I think this is something that when we play more of it later, I'm going to bring up time and time again. Boy, the fact that it's just a JRPG sure is kind of disappointing, Like, it has all of this weird storytelling. It has all these weird, wacky characters. It has this, like, pie-in-the-sky aspirations of, like, deep philosophical musings about. And the fact that it's just the most typical, bare bones in some ways, turn-based JRPG is just, it's wild, and yo.
Yeah, and it's like, so this tutorial dungeon you're in is like 2 characters.
Yep.
Which is a 100% bonus compared to most of the fighting you do in this game so far that we've done.
Yep.
But yeah, it's not only is it like kind of simple, it's actually, I think, pretty tedious combat in the sense that it is like, it is very fond of showing you its animations, and the animations are quite long.
Not as long as Shadow Hearts. So I think my perception might be broken there.
Like, it takes quite a bit of time to deal not a ton of damage. But there's this weird sort of chain combo system that it expects you to employ early on.
Action points.
Yeah, bankable action points. The thing I don't understand is there's like enemy broad, let's call them geni, that are like
human, robots, and aliens. The three types of enemies.
And what I can't quite suss out, or if I missed it, is if certain attacks are better against different, like if
robots
there's affinity.
Are weak against tech attacks. Humans are weak against physical attacks, I think, and Gnosis are resistant to both. I'll admit I kind of buttoned through the tutorial because I already played the first hour of this game.
Yeah,
previously.
And like the thing is, you can kind of kludge through without knowing that. Insofar as I got through everything we're talking about today,
it is not without strategy, but it is also like not super complex.
And again, the fact that it is just a turn-based JRPG, considering all of its weirdness elsewhere, it's wild.
Where's my Resonance of Fate combat?
Sure, where's my tails?
Where's my sick air juggles? I mean, they happen in the cutscenes when Cosmos just frickin' wipes things out.
Yeah, when Cosmos like pulls out her machine guns and just murders things, it's the coolest shit. And then you play it.
This is the good anime.
You play it, and then it's like, man.
And then
I want to just point out, like,
yeah,
JRPGs do this from time to time, but the main character being a healer sucks. I hate it every single time. It sucks here. It sucks every single time it happens.
Yeah, your job is to, like, band-aid. Like, you want to punch things. I don't want to stand in the back row. And, like, I only want to do that in, like, D&D, where I, in fact, love doing that. But, yeah, it's a real fucking bummer. But, so you get this tutorial dungeon, which has...
talk about the design of the ship itself and navigating the ship, because, god damn.
I didn't have a problem with that.
It's just monotonous enough to where me playing this game, not necessarily blind, because Jesus Christ, no, but it's monotonous enough to where it's easy to, like, it's easy to lose your track, and it's like, wait, where am I going again?
It's a game that has a radar, but not a mini-map. And there's no menu mini-map. There is a diegetic map that is available on the ship in portions, up to the point where it stops being available, which is really fun. You get through this tutorial dungeon, and some insane technology shit happens where they have to forcibly, like, pull Xion out of the Matrix.
She sees a ghost girl.
Yeah, a ghost girl.
No context is given. With
a Greek cross in front of the weird monster thing that you fight at the end of it. You get a scolding, basically, from the staff who are like, boy, it's almost wound up like last time. And everyone keeps referring to last time. Which comes to light with some incident that happened like 2 years ago. That's like unclear much more than that, but it was apparently very bad. The player is then told they need to deliver a report to effectively the commander of the ship on progress with this robot waifu that you just spent, let's say, like 30 minutes with, walking through what looks like, ripped from the headlines Middle East setting place. So you get to wander this sort of plasticine white corridored ship. Is this the point where you can go to the Realian place?
Yes. Okay.
Because, like, in theory, like, I got the sense, I don't know if it's, they give you some sort of, like, hey, you should really hurry up and get to the bridge and talk to the commander as quickly as you can. But I did not. I explored, like, everything.
Yep.
And I don't know if they, like, penalize you for doing that or not.
No, I don't think so. I
Cool.
think it's a character building moment because it
Sure.
also shows that Shion visits the Realian quarters, and in this game, Realians are artificial they're replicants. They're artificial
Yeah.
people who are used for different tasks and murder, and it's kind of implied that they're like biomechanical in some ways.
I mean, they have to be, because
Yeah.
we also encounter another character at this point who is, like, maybe the most, hey, I'm evil,
The most anime villain,
thing I've seen in a while.
Lieutenant Virgil.
Lieutenant Virgil.
Right, Lieutenant Virgil. Also, like, every single time you meet a new character or there's a cutscene, like, they have these long lectures about, like, humanity, symbolism. Virgil has a lot of choice quotes that just are like,
He's just
What
like,
did you
I
just
don't
say?"
think these are people. And Shion's like, I do think these are people. And then he's like, but you work for a corporation that does not represent them as people. And then you find out that he is a, quote, DMT addict. And if you look up in the glossary,
Yeah.
it turns out that in this world, you can get addicted to eating the brainstem matter of Realians, these artificial people, because apparently it gets you high. And that's why he looks like an anime villain.
Yeah, he has all this weird scarification that comes along with doing that. And this all stems from some battle that was fought N years ago that led to the Treaty of N, whatever, Miltia?
Yeah. Miltia, which is also Shion's homeworld.
Yeah, sort of established some basic human-esque rights for Realians, which doesn't necessarily track with, like, I want to eat them tendencies. Like, this guy walks in, just starts sniffing these weird human, like, anthropomorphic robot people. It's just like, oh, they smell disgusting. They're sick. Can you smell them? They smell terrible. Ugh. And it was at this point that I was like, right, when did Metal Gear Solid 2 come out? The answer was, like, a couple months before this. Like, short enough time that they didn't literally look at that and then model parts of this game on it. But let me tell you, people involved in this game played Metal Gear Solid 1, definitely played Metal Gear Solid 2. And if you don't think the way characters monologue about themselves come into play, really check out the next dungeon for more proof of this theory.
But remember, they're not just called Realians, they're designer children. They use that term over and over again. They reference the past.
Weapons-grade Realians.
So, you have this encounter with, like, the good person working with Realians, and then his name has a V in it, name I forgot. It's Scar individual, the cannibal man who eats the robots. Virgil, thank you. You then make your way to the bridge and deliver this report where the commander of the ship more or less is like, hey, did you finish working on the thing? And you're like, well, mostly. And he's like, what do you mean mostly? And you're like, well, we haven't tested it, but we've, like, tested it. And you basically get dressed down in front of a bunch of people about you really need to have this weird android robot lady ready to fight the Gnosis as soon as possible. Because if Gnosis show up on the ship, everyone is just gonna be fucked. So it sort of comes together, at least what I think comes together here is, like, Cosmos is not a Realian. She's like a weird android throwback thing. Everyone seems to think this project is this ridiculous... Like, it would be like building a trebuchet.
It's now, the F-35 of...
Yeah, if the F-35 were a trebuchet.
If the F-35 were a robot lady.
Like, everyone seems unhappy with this project not being finished. This conversation's got rolled up on by another officer who's like, yo, maybe we shouldn't blow up Shion's, like, whole scene right now. And then you get this cutscene where you get some real Emperor Palpatine shit goes on, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, what's his name? Commander...
Russian name.
Is this when we're introduced to, like, the actual evil things in this game?
Yes.
And then he basically one of the officers on the ship, he's told by his dark master, shrouded in shadow, that the
Cherenkov, that's his name. The
Cherenkov,
officer.
yeah, the Gnosis are gonna attack the ship, and he needs to secure, quote, the Zohar.
Yeah.
Right.
Which is the big old gold monolith that just ominously hovers, makes you see ghost girls.
So let's talk about the Gnosis.
Yeah. So, couple fun vocabulary words. The Zohar is like the foundational work of like the Kabbalah school of Jewish mysticism. It is basically attributed to like a 12th or like 13th century Jew living in Spain who attributed it to like a post Second Temple destruction Jewish figure. Gnosis is just a Greek word for knowledge. That's all it is. We're just throwing shit at a wall here. It's just kind of weird.
The words sound cool.
Yeah.
They're weird, but in-game, they're weird jelly aliens.
They're angels from Evangelion. They're weird jelly aliens.
And like they're
and then they turn
translucent
people into salt and then shatter them?
Yeah. They suckle your brain. You suck his brains out. Starship Troopers style, but cooler. And you can apparently survive being mostly turned into salt, but once they get like all the way, then it's bad. Because you see this happen at least once, if not a second time, I think.
There's the scene where the one soldier gets turned into salt and then shattered into bits and pieces.
So yeah, the Gnosis arrive on the ship, and they're basically what's the word I'm looking for? They're translucent.
Interdimensional.
Yes.
Plane shifting.
They're wispy. You're unable to physically attack them. Ethereal beings that can interact with our physical world, but we can't interact with them.
Can't shoot them with our giant robots.
And without being notified, the magical sarcophagi, which contains Cosmos, the android, just sort of turns on, and is like, yo, shit, time to go. This was the point where I laughed for about 5 minutes because I realized what was happening, which was, at this point, it's like 2, maybe 3 hours into the game. The game Halo Combat Evolved, which is a very good game, gets to, like, the point you get to in this game in, like, 5 minutes. This game takes 3 hours to literally cover, like, the same themes. Like, weird super soldier, aliens looking for Earth, magic robot inside of a special box that we need to take out to fight the thing. Like, it's all the same.
I don't know if it was me, but the fact that they're translucent made it to where especially on this ship, goddamn, it was kind of hard to see them and like tell if there was an evil thing that would throw me into a battle, or is that just some sort of flickering textures because of how I'm playing this game?
That sounds like something you might have been having, because
that sounds like a you problem.
Yeah. That's fun. That's really fun, because
they're almost invisible,
and like fighting them kind of actively sucks. This was where I noticed that the game was giving me a lot of the so you can't just like escape fights in this game. You need to use an item, but they're giving you a shit ton of those items at this point. Like I wound up with like 30 of them, and I think that's a mercy because for a while here you're just fighting as Shion, and just solo fighting one or two of these monsters just takes a while and is actively like really dull, like not fun. Experience yields are low.
Shion is not a damage dealer character.
No, so it's just
she's got a pile bunker, which is cool. I'm always into anime pile bunkers.
This is a not really good dungeon by any
stretch of the imagination. She's like a white mage,
and it's all identical corridors with some light puzzle solving sort of shit to like, you gotta make the monster go over here so I can go around the pillar. Kind of stuff. This is where you start finding these red doors around too.
Hidden doors.
Doors with keys. You get some real Doom-esque shit here. finally you get along to a point where I don't remember if your encounter with Virgil or your encounter with Cosmos happened first.
Happens first.
And it's this extended sequence of like combat in a corridor, which leads to a bunch of Realians self-destructing. And Virgil talking a lot of Yang from inside of a mech about how Realians all suck and they're just war tools, basically.
Yeah.
And starts spelling out the fact that he's like a weird robot cannibal man.
Yeah.
I guess if you hadn't read the in-game wiki, which that's like the only one of those I read, and I was kind of glad I did. Then we finally get our encounter with Cosmos. Finally, we get to unite the two characters.
Now, you now have 3 characters in your
party. Oh yeah,
party.
Ziggy's in the party too. Not Ziggy.
No,
Virgil's in the party.
Yeah, he doesn't have any abilities or do anything. Almost as if he's a placeholder party member.
Just to teach you that combat can in fact be slightly faster with 3 people.
Is this when we start to learn more about the Hilbert effect, our anti-Gnosis system to draw the Gnosis into our plane of reality?
Yeah, basically, Cosmos can break through the Angel's AT fields. That's an Evangelion reference, but she can make the aliens manifest in the real world, and then you can shoot them with bullets, and then
them go die.
Get into a pretty great cutscene where Cosmos just appears with 2 miniguns and just murders everything.
Yeah, it's actually one of the few times where I went yeah!
This is a well-directed anime cutscene, especially for 2001.
Yeah. This is the point, too, where she just fucking kills Virgil, right?
Yep.
Yeah. And then Shion's not happy about it, even though
Virgil's
it seems like a
huge
good
fucking
thing
dick.
to do.
Flesh eater.
Yeah. And this is, I think, maybe the best thing we've seen so far, up to maybe like the end of the second dungeon dialogue kind of thing. Because it's this, like, gets to the, like, free will component of this game in a big way. Because Cosmos is just like, look, like, this was, like, a shitty military situation. I'm designed to take, like, calculations and make, like, the least destructive decision. Like, the safest decision, in this case, to protect your ass. And his dumb ass was in the way, and working around him was going to give me, like, a 10% less chance of, like, saving your life. So, yeah, fuck him, he's dead. Got a problem? I'm a robot.
Yeah.
You made
Cosmos is very ardently a robot.
Yeah. We didn't even get into the name. Cosmos is a there's a word for it.
Recursive acronym.
Recursive acronym. It is like GNU is not Unix, is the one that always comes to my mind. Cosmos Obey Strategical Multiple Operation System. That's total fucking nonsense. Those words shouldn't be used like that.
It also sounds like cosmos, so space.
Oh.
Anyways, so we're actually getting to maybe my favorite part of this game, or just the wackiness. So we kill Virgil. Yeah. She gives her a justification.
Yep. First
Shion
real
and
boss
Alan.
fight.
Shion and Alan
go in a mech. That's fun.
Yeah. So Shion and Alan are put into an escape pod by Cosmos. And Chernikov is holding to the outside in a spacesuit. You watch the fucking spaceship explode in the background, and Chernikov is just holding on for dear life.
Yep.
As your space pod careens through the vacuum of space and lands on a planet.
Yep.
Oh yeah, and worth noting, he's sticking around on the ship as long as he to basically secure this Zohar device, which... the first thing you see when you see this thing floating in space that's initially being recovered is, like, some red shirt approaching it and just fucking disappearing. So, as you're wandering around the ship, there are, like, mooks being like, yo, there's a thing in the storage room, and it really sucks, and apparently just, like, ate 5 people. And no one knows what it is. And yet, Shrenkov has been, like, actively told by the weird Emperor Palpatine man that, like, this thing takes precedence over, like, everyone. Like, everything you're doing right now, fuck it, just, like, we need to keep our hands on this. We need to make sure that the weird Zohar, Gnosis don't get it. Getting into proper noun syndrome. Yeah. Which they do. The Gnosis basically get the thing. But is it a decoy? Did I make that up?
It is a replica. It is a replica of the original, which was the one that was found in Africa 4,000 years ago.
There's some fun and about with the scavenger ship Elsa that I like.
Well, this is where the first mid cutscene save point happens.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did
we talk about this? Can we talk about this?
It's charming.
This game's indulgence is delightful.
Like, and Final Fantasy X wasn't, like, all the way immune from this, but, like, clearly all these developers were just, like, fucking stoked about DVDs, because they're like, oh my god, we could just pack these fuckers full of shit. Just
You
unbelievably
motherfuckers
so.
gonna be making Final Fantasy X with all these cutscenes. We're gonna out-cinematic you.
Yeah, they really tried. They really they tried their
don't have
darndest.
the same CG budget, but like definitely feels like this game had a budget. They got the London Philharmonic Orchestra for all the orchestral stuff, which I don't think is cheap.
Yeah, they don't work on commission probably.
And then we get the stuff with the scavenger ship, and this
Yeah.
is a good moment.
Now we turn into Cowboy Bebop briefly.
Yep.
I guess not briefly. This actually goes
Now,
on
for
for a while.
reference, how long do you think we spend in terms of hours on this scavenger ship, Elsa?
I thought like an hour. I timed
An
this.
hour?
This was like 40 minutes to an hour.
Sure. But here's my point, Jeff. How much of that time is actual gameplay?
0. None.
0.
None.
So there's an entire set piece that is communicated completely through cutscenes. It's a story critical set piece, and we
There's
don't
a
even
second
play
cutscene
anything.
Save point.
There's one save point. Yeah, like you said, there's one save point, but this entire set piece, this entire scene, this entire act is non-playable.
And it's like a sixth of what we did. And we're like not even to the third waypoint of this game.
I don't even think like the crux of the story has happened yet. Basically, some scavengers come up to the ruins of the Vogland. They're like, "All right, let's get some scrap or so that we can pay off the boss." And then Cosmos bumps up against the ship and basically says, "I'm gonna break this window and suck you all into the void of space if you don't let me in."
Yeah. Failure to comply will result in the destruction of this window. The captain's like, bullshit. And she's like, well, I punched it once. If I do this again, you're just going to die. Like, let's not play this game.
And then Shion gets in contact with them, and Cosmos is like, "It's okay, you'll be safe. There's a high chance of a rescue ship." And Shion is like, "No, bitch, I'm coming with you. You're my robot."
Cosmos is like, you are slowing my ass down. We don't have time to do this. Gotta go by. And she's like, well,
and then
I'm
Shion
just...
threatens to open the escape pod and kill both her and Alan. And then Cosmos has to let them on.
I just want to say that even though I find her actual design kind of disgusting,
It's very anime.
Cosmos as a character is kind of great.
Yeah.
Like, I realize that this archetype of robot only looks at the numbers and looks at everything objectively and has no subjective part of it, no emotion. But she's such a formula break to the standard tropes that we see, because we're going to get to Junior in a little bit. But
Yeah.
that little shit. Cosmos's interactions with just everyone around her, it's fun. It's fun and about that I kind of actually enjoy.
Yeah.
So Shion, Alan, Chernikov are now on the Elsa. The captain's name is Matthew.
Yes.
So it's Matthew, Tony, Hammer, and Chaos.
There's just a dude named Chaos lowercase.
all
Yeah.
lowercase.
Unbelievable.
He has white hair and he can destroy the Gnosis, so he's probably going to be like a villain or something later on.
He looks like a Kingdom Hearts character if I ever saw one.
Yeah. Has a very recognizable voice
He's got
actor,
belts
too.
and he's got a thigh belt.
Yep.
Hello. Late breaking addition to the show. ZP had a little sequence break here. So to summarize what happens at the end of this Elsa sequence, a Gnosis shows up. It touches Cherenkov. Chaos wanders into the room, touches the big scary monster. The monster disappears. All of the new people, including Shion, Cherenkov, and Cosmos, are very impressed by this. The actual crew of the Elsa, they don't mind. All the other details that may or may not be in here either were sequence broken by ZP, or were me reading from a Wikipedia and spoiling elements of the plot. We now continue. We've got to keep moving.
Let's talk about Space Station Pallades.
Yeah, so...
And Ziggurat 8.
Space Station Pallades is a giant glass float... No, that's not the pyramid. Like a triangle, empty floating place.
Oh yeah, at some point there's an ominous floating pyramid in space where a guy says ominous words, and you're like, oh yeah, this is like Evangelion.
And then we get to Pallades, and that's where we meet Ziggurat 8.
He's a cyborg.
He's a cyborg. He's not a Realian, he's a cyborg.
Once again referred to as like an anachronistic old tech. He is instructed to rescue a 100 series Realian from this military group. What are they called again?
UTIC, right?
UTIC, yeah.
Yeah, UTIC.
And so he's got to go solo sneaking mission, weapons and equipment, OSP. Let's get the Metal Gear comparisons. Also pretty blatant in this part, where you have to do a bad stealth dungeon.
Humanity's divided it in like this like tribalism, like everyone's kind of a different faction in this galaxy, but everyone doesn't like the Gnosis. This is where we play the most significant part of the game, right? This is where
the most video game happens, yes.
And it's bad.
Yeah,
this dungeon sucks.
Didn't it, Jeff? It really sucked.
Like, right.
The UTIC battleship is like where I was like, I had this moment like, if this is how every dungeon if this is how every actual gameplay part of this thing controls, I don't want to do this.
The game has not yet trusted us to have a full 3-person party.
Right.
Or mechanics, or like really invest in the mechanics yet.
So think about Dragon Quest, right? We're Ultima 4, a game we've already played, right? Like, and ignore all the ethical considerations of Ultima 4. Like, what are these, like, fundamentally games about? They are about growing and, like, accumulating power. And you do that by... for better or worse, conflict. You fight monsters, they give you experience, you gain a level. I think JRPG design, specifically, is, like, fundamentally at odds with stealth gameplay, because this is a whole section where, like, your goal is to not engage in combat, which, if you choose not to do that, you wind up with a character who seems to level to about wherever you wind up leveling Xion to, he matched that level, like he was like level 7 or something. So he didn't start as like a level 1 loser. But you wind up probably under-leveled by the end of it. So you're like semi-encouraged to engage in combat. But it's solo combat, and it's kind of limited. And you kind of are chipping damage out of these enemies. And they beat your ass, and you have no means of healing yourself.
Accessory. Yeah, and
well,
if you don't
Xion
have the
is the
accessory
dealer, but...
that prevents poison, you fucked.
So this kind of for people who this is a podcast, so why don't we explain how enemy encounters work? Is it a random encounter system?
Is it chrono style? You see the monsters on the overworld map, and they will, if they see you, they will chase you. And
you can you can try to run away. It's kind of like a little bit of Persona too. There's a way to like get some sort of advantage, or like
you can shoot objects in the environment to get an advantage. If you shoot an explosive barrel next to an enemy, you will start with like an extra boost gauge in combat, stuff like that.
But yeah, I definitely agree with you, Jeff, to where stealth is all about avoiding combat, and doing that in a game where you need the levels, you need the points. It's just completely antithetical, and I don't know if they realize that. And then also, none of your characters are especially, noted for their stealth or dexterity. Like, Cosmos is a booby anime gun lady, and every single time we've seen her in combat, she just pulls out these giant guns and just mows people down. There's no preempting that, you need to take stealthing about seriously. And in fact, in parts of the environment, it feels like it's impossible to do.
Yeah, it's just cludged into there. You've got to hold down the shoulder button the entire time.
Yeah.
I don't
It's awkward.
I don't
And-
trust
and
this
and
dungeon.
on top of that, in the handful of CRPGs and JRPGs that I've played that have had stealth, the way that they've encouraged or incentivized you to do that is the random encounters are super hard. Like, say what you will about OG Final Fantasy II, but Jeff, when you failed a sequence where you're not supposed to avoid, the guards were looking at the doors and you were just supposed to interpret that to mean, I'm just going to walk past all these guys. When you try and fight them, you get your ass kicked. In
Yeah.
here, most of the encounters are just with some, soldiers. And really, if I did get into health trouble, it's just because, my party kind of sucks.
All right, so you go through this stealth sequence, like Ziggurat 8, he's voiced by the guy who voices Bato in Ghost in the Shell Standalone Complex, so I'm already pro him.
Yeah, he's
Is
fun and cool.
this where we learn about the cathedral ship?
And then you go to there's a cathedral ship you gotta sneak around, and then he rescues Momo, who is your obligatory anime little girl character in a JRPG, which...
She's got pink hair, and she looks exactly like you think she looks.
Moe.
listen, as a noted connoisseur of RPGs, both dubious and not, one of my least favorite archetypes is the small child character. And you're all
Wears a very
you're
short
already
one-piece
going
skirt.
from a deficit. She is, I think, Elise in Tales of Exilia is okay, and that's about it. And Momo is, from the little I have seen of her, she is the little girl who is also, because she's a anti-Realian weapon, basically. She is also like knowledgeable about stuff. And so she calls Ziggurat 8 Ziggy, and he's like, call me whatever you want. And then he has a flashback to his human son back when he was a human. And I'm sure that'll be a character arc.
Yeah.
He has a special ability where he can increase his strength and defense while he is in the front row and she is in the back. So
Yeah, the combat stops being abjectly really, really shitty to be involved with once there's like literally 100% bonus in like people on the field.
Yep.
So at this point you can go around and grind a little bit.
Yep.
And poke around and open the mysterious red doors.
So you run around, you stealth around, you fight 3 robots, which I don't think we've mentioned this, but the robots are called like AUGs.
Oh, yeah. Eggs.
Or AGWS, Anti-Gnosis Weapon Systems.
Which everyone pronounces eggs.
Yep,
Eggs. Which is what I call my cat.
Basically, the characters in your party who are not robots can summon giant robots.
Which have their own, like, ammo pools and stuff that they need to deal with, and you can equip them, and it's like, they looked at Armored Core and were like, right, give us about 10% of that, and we'll be
God,
good.
Momo is a magical girl. Can we talk about how Momo is a magical girl?
Momo is a magical girl with a magical fairy wand who shoots lasers.
100%.
This is a science fiction, like, philosophical game, and there's straight up a magical girl who waves a magic wand to change her outfit to fight people with the Hilbert effect.
Out of her magic wand. Also,
how is there magic in this? Oh god.
She's a Realian, dog. She's got that replicant magic.
The transformation ethers are weird.
She's got some spells. And so you fight 3 robots, and then you fight a dude with a sword whose name is like what, Donovich or something.
He is... God. Editor's note. This character's name is Margulis.
He seems like he will be a recurring minor villain. He's a guy with a sword that's on fire, which is how you know he's a bad guy.
Every single time that Momo says the word daddy, I die inside.
To be clear, is this a boss fight that you can lose and still progress the story? Because I beat it.
I beat it as well, so I would know.
I know how to play video games.
Yeah.
And they escape.
The relationship between Ziggy and Momo, so it's a father-daughter relationship, but there are times where it feels off enough to where I think that they have weird sexual tension.
Okay, that's you.
What? He lets her fix him.
I can't say I really got that.
You know, anime is poison for all of us. We all ate the brain stems of anime, and now we have become the anime villains.
This is about as far as we've gotten in this game so far.
It's almost like there's so much in this game that it's kind of hard to parse together into a coherent narrative.
It's so dense. So much is happening.
Yeah, and yet, as I said...
I only played like 2 hours.
The plot has not advanced.
Yes, a lot of just so much world building.
This is like, I appreciate it. I am... If this was an episodic anime, I'd watch it because I'm broken, and that's the level of pacing they're going for, is like, oh, this is a 52-episode anime.
And it's worth noting, A, this was supposed to be a 6-part arc that ultimately wound up being 3, and B, actually did get an anime adaptation.
Yeah.
So...
Yep.
Well, I mean, there's something
so
to be
many ways
said
to
about
be unsatisfied.
how... So Xenogears has like this weird progeny to how it leads to this as well. And Xenogears was also envisioned to be a 6-part series.
Yeah.
And even it was supposed to be like weirdly connected to like Secrets of Mana or Final Fantasy of some sort. Like both. I like the weirdness of the game,
wanted to make their Gnosticism fanfiction for ages, and it sounds like they finally got the resources to do so with Xenoblade. But I need to see more. I need to know.
I think I'm with you too, but I don't know if I really enjoy playing this game. Like the actual playing of it is just tedious and
I don't
slow.
hate it. But it's not like exemplary.
Like, don't get me wrong. When like a cutscene pops off and it's just the weirdest shit, it's just, man, this is good. Give me more of this. But man, are there just times where I play this game and I just feel like it's like, oh, gotta get through this and see some weird Jungian psychology be brought up in a game again.
Middle of the road, early 2000s JRPG, like still very much.
And then sometimes that
high.
shit doesn't really land very well. There are times where like you spend time with characters that it's like, this feels totally ancillary. This is going absolutely nowhere, and I don't know if I like this. And so when it's not weird enough, I feel like, I've just committed myself to a 40-minute cutscene that's going nowhere. Cool.
This game could have only been made in the early 2000s.
Yeah, the Wild West of early full-on DVD JRPGs.
And like this was back when the JRPG genre was still like king of the budget. Like this was back when you wanted to show off your technical prowess and your visual and storytelling skills. Like straight up JRPGs were where a lot of video game storytelling was happening on consoles this time.
Yeah, and I mean, Namco picked this one up, which like maybe is a step down from Square publishing Xenogears, but
it's complicated, and this is part of the reason why I think that Xenosaga will never, ever, ever be remade or re-released, is because Monolith Soft was originally a subsidiary of Namco, Bandai Namco, before they eventually got bought out by Nintendo, because those Xenoblade games were well received and sold well in Japan in particular.
Don't forget Baten Kaitos.
And Baten Kaitos was also a very good seller on Nintendo platform. So just at some point, Nintendo's like, Namco, we're gonna buy this JRPG subsidiary of yours for like billions of dollars.
They're gonna help make Breath of the Wild.
They're gonna do stuff like that, but also that's probably why Project X Zone will never see another game, because the rights for that would be really messy.
Yep.
But I would definitely, if there was some sort of, I guess we'll just say it, I am playing this completely emulated on the PCSX too. I would be okay if they remade this game, even if it was just like a shot-for-shot thing. Like, they don't even touch up the cutscenes. I'd be okay with that. But
I'm saying you have access to a turbo button. I am playing on real hardware because I'm an idiot.
Samesies.
I don't use it because I'm joining you in solidarity.
Okay. It's been 2 hours.
It's been 2 hours. We're going to wrap this up. I think we're going to continue playing Xenosaga Episode 1, De Villes Zermacht, by Democracy, 2 out of 3. seem in
Damn
favor
it.
of it.
Fuck.
I have to know what other nonsense is happening in here.
I mean, it's still less complicated than listening to you guys try to explain the end of Chrono Cross, so haven't gotten there yet. I hear some things about the later 2 games that make me think we might eventually get there if we cover those.
So one of those games came up. So do you want me to just tell you?
No,
No.
I think I know, but I'm actually trying to keep myself a little...
Oh, Jeff, do you want to know?
I'm a pure boy. Don't ruin me.
Because
Man.
I want to experience it for myself.
Oh, man.
Like, I know that Robot Mary Magdalene is a thing.
But do you know which character appears as the source of all this magical goodness?
No, and I want to be fresh. I want to be
Oh,
clean.
man.
Keep us pure, CP.
I would like to see this madness unfold for myself.
Okay, well we're putting a bow on this one. So we will continue.
What's our assignment, Master?
Just keep going. We'll find a good jumping off
figure it
point.
out. Talk about it on the Discord.
Based on roughly the IGN walkthrough subject headers for the various sections of this game, and we'll go from there. We'll probably lay it out on the Discord. To wit, thank you all for tuning into this episode of Off the Deep End. If you would like to send us direct questions and that sort of thing, or ask why I insisted on giving a really dry history lecture, you can send those along to inquiries@deep.lol. That's inquiries@deep.lol. If you would like to help keep this show and the Deep Listens mothership flying, please consider kicking us a few bucks on our Patreon. That's at patreon.com/deeplistens. Any dollar amount will be greatly appreciated and will get you access to the Deep Listens Discord, where you can send complaints and prayer concerns in real time. Special shout out, I failed to do this the last couple episodes, to the artist known as SuperSex420 for providing us with the podcast theme Halfway. This and other rate tracks by SuperSex420 are available on bandcamp.com. Just search for SuperSex420. See you next time, and remember, failure to comply will result in the destruction of this window. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.